completing day 5 of Wes Boss's JabaScript 30. Today's activity is to create an image panel using Flexbox. What will happen is if you click on any one of these images, the image panel will expand and two words will pop in, one from the top of the screen and one from the bottom. The cool thing about today's exercise is there's just a little bit of JavaScript and most of what you see is being controlled by CSS. Flexbox is responsible for the layout of all of the items on the page, and transition is what I'm going to use to get the image to expand and the words to drop in onto the page. Let's first start with Flexbox and see what it's doing. I'm going to start with panels, which is a large parent container for all of these child items here. And in this instance, Flex is what's going to get these panels to line up vertically, so to speak. If you see that I remove Flex, they're going to line up on top of one another. So the first thing that I'm going to do is change this display to Flex, and that will get these panels to line up side by side. If we look at a panel, the first thing I want to point out is Flex 1. That is Flexbox way of evenly distributing any extra space that's left over. If I remove Flex, you'll notice I have all of this extra space that CSS doesn't know what to do with. So by providing a value to Flex and by providing the same value to each panel, CSS is going to evenly distribute any extra space that's left over to each panel. A cool feature of Flexbox is that one item can be both an item of a Flex container, and it could also be a Flex container itself. So for instance, this panel here is an item of this larger panels container, but the panel itself is also a Flex container of all of these child elements. To get them to line up in the middle, I'm going to use justify content and align items, and I'm going to give them both a value of center. That is going to align them up across the cross axis and the main axis. And I want the child elements to stack on top of each other instead of a row. So I used flex direction column. If you notice when I remove flex direction, Flexbox automatically lines things up in a row, kind of what I did with this parent container in the beginning, except now I want the child elements to stack on top of one another. So I'm going to use flex direction column. Before we look at the CSS file, I want to show you what it's going to do while we're still looking in the browser. Essentially what I'm going to do with the JavaScript is I'm going to add this class called open, and once open is going to trigger a transition, and once that transition ends, JavaScript is automatically going to add this extra class called open active. Open will expand the image, the panel, and then open active is what's going to drop the words onto the screen. So first, actually, let me close this. Uh-oh. There is a little bug in this program when transition end occurs that I'll have to work out. So let's start here. And if I add the class open, now the image expands, and then you notice open active gets added onto the element once the transition from open is finished. And if I remove the class open, the panel will contract, open active will remove, and then the words disappear. So let's take a little bit closer look at the code to see what's going on. We'll start with CSS, and I'm going to first point out this transition. What transition is going to do is tell transform how long it should take to run the transformation. So when I expand a panel, I need to increase the font size and also increase the flex, and that's going to take about 0.7 seconds to occur. Down here, when I add the class of open, that is the transformation that's going to occur. So the font size will increase, and flex, like we talked about earlier, but instead of being 1, will now be 5, so this one container will take up much more space on the screen. The second transition we're going to worry about involves translate, and this is what's going to move the words from off of the screen onto the screen. You'll first notice these two classes outside of the middle portion right here. This is for the top text, this is for the bottom text, and in both cases I'm going to use transform translate y, which moves an element along the y-axis. The negative 100 will move the top text off of the screen, and the positive 100 will move the bottom X off of the screen. And then in the middle, this is when I'm going to add another class called OpenActive, and that's going to reverse the effect of the translate Y. It's going to move those text back onto the screen. So with that being said, let's look at the JavaScript where I needed to grab each panel and then add 2 event listeners to each panel. One is going to trigger when I click on it, and then another one that will trigger automatically once the transition has ended. And when you click on an element, we're going to add the class open, like I showed you in the DevTools. Once the transition for open is finished, we're going to add this class OpenActive. Or if I click on an element that already has the class open on it, open will be removed, the panel will contract, and as soon as that transition is finished, this OpenActive class will then be removed and the text will disappear. Thank you.